Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Uh,
Today, we are going to be looking at thought.
thought.
Yeah, what is thought? We all think all the time, right? But
Right.
do we really know what's going on up
Yeah.
there? And are we really in control?
Yeah. That's the big question.
So to help us with this, we're going to be using as our guide, Thought as a System by David Bohm.
Yeah. It's a fascinating book.
I think it's a great choice because, we all think.
We do.
So it's very applicable to all of us.
Yeah. And it's actually a transcribed seminar, so it's kind of fun because you feel like you're in the room
Oh, cool.
with David Bohm and like 50 other participants kind of hashing these ideas out.
So it's less lecture hall and more like a,
Yeah. Much more conversational.
yeah, cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So before we get into the details,
Mm.
what's the basic premise of the book? Why should we care about how our thought works?
Well, Bohm's argument is that thought isn't just a passive observer, just kind of watching the world go by.
Right.
It's actually an active participant in shaping our reality.
Okay, so you're saying that my thoughts are actually kind of
They're having a real impact.
calling the shots.
Exactly. And most of the time it's running on autopilot.
Oh, that's a little scary.
It can be. And that leads to a lot of, conflicts and confusion and...
Okay, well, so how do we know that our thoughts aren't just kind of passively
Right.
observing the world?
Yeah.
How do we know that they're actually having this impact?
Well, so the book starts with a foreword by Lee Nickel,
Okay,
who kind of throws a wrench in our typical understanding of thought.
okay,
We often think about objectivity, like we can be this neutral observer.
okay.
But have you ever noticed, like, how your mood or your expectations can completely change how you see a situation?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if I'm already dreading a meeting, I'm probably going to walk in and just see
Exactly.
problems everywhere.
You're going to interpret everything in a negative light.
Yeah, yeah.
So Nickel argues that this whole idea of, like, a neutral observer separate from the world, it just doesn't hold up.
Okay.
Thought is inherently involved. It's shaping our perceptions every step of the way.
So, I mean, it's not just kind of a mirror reflecting back.
Mhm.
It's more active than that.
It's more like a lens that's coloring
Okay.
how we see things.
So then what does Bohm mean when he talks about thought then? I mean,
Yeah.
is it just the ideas that we have in our minds?
He actually expands the definition way beyond just the intellectual.
Okay.
For Bohm, thought is this whole system,
Okay.
encompassing our bodies, our emotions, our reflexes, even the stuff we create in the world.
Okay, wait a minute. Even like my, overflowing bookshelf,
Uh,
is that
That's thought, too.
is thought too?
Think about it. Everything we create starts with an idea, a process in our minds.
Okay.
Right? So your overflowing bookshelf is like a physical manifestation of your thoughts about organization,
Right.
your love of books, your design aesthetic.
So it's like solidified thought.
Exactly. It's solidified thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does he break down this system? What are the elements of this system of thought?
So he starts by kind of debunking this assumption that a lot of us have.
Okay.
We tend to think that our thoughts are based on fresh, direct perception of the world.
Okay.
Like we're seeing things as they really are in the moment.
Right.
But Bohm says no thought is actually largely shaped by past memories
Okay.
that get projected onto the present.
Oh, so it's almost like we're seeing the world through the lens of our past.
Exactly. It's like we're wearing these glasses
Okay.
that are tinted by our past experiences.
I can see that.
Yeah. And so think about something as simple as driving a car.
Right.
You don't consciously analyze every single movement you make when you're behind the wheel.
Right.
You're relying on memories,
Right.
on patterns of thought and action that have become automatic.
Right. And I guess I never really thought about it that way, but I mean, so much of what we do
Right.
in life is based on,
It's habitual.
it's
Yeah.
habitual. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So then how does feelings play into all this? Because we've talked about memories,
Right.
Influencing thought, but
So Bohm doesn't separate feelings from thinking,
okay.
and he really emphasizes the role of feelings.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how, like, a strong emotion can just completely hijack your thoughts
Oh, yeah.
and lead you to make a decision that you might regret later?
Oh, yeah. Like when I sent that angry email when I was hungry, not
Yeah.
my proudest moment.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
But it shows how powerful that connection between feelings and thoughts can be.
Okay. So we've got memories and emotions all mixed up in this system of thought.
It's all intertwined.
Yeah. Okay. So where do these reflexes fit in? Then we haven't talked about these neurophysiological reflexes.
Right. So every time we think or act in a certain way,
Okay.
those patterns are literally carving a pathway in our brains.
Okay.
right? And over time, those pathways become so ingrained that we just start responding automatically.
So almost like a record player stuck in a groove.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like we're playing the same old record over and over again.
Yeah.
And this is where the illusion of control comes in.
Oh, boy.
We like to believe that we're in the driver's seat,
Right.
consciously choosing our thoughts and actions.
Right.
But Bohm suggests that often it's the other way around.
So you're saying, like, my brain is running the show without me even realizing it?
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Okay, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, and especially when you consider how these ingrained reflexes play out in our interactions with others.
Okay.
Think about conflicts.
Yeah.
We often blame others for our problems
Right.
without realizing how our own automatic thought patterns might be contributing to the situation.
So we're not really seeing things clearly. We're just reacting based on
Exactly. We're
social
reacting
threat.
based on those pre-programmed responses.
Wow. Okay. So then, to complicate matters even further, he adds this whole layer of thought as being collective.
Right.
So it's not just our own thoughts, but also the thoughts of...
Our thoughts aren't purely individual.
Yeah, okay.
They're constantly being shaped by the culture we live in, the language we speak,
Right.
the values we share with others.
So we're all swimming in this sea of thought and influencing each other.
Think about how quickly trends spread,
Okay.
or how easily we can get caught up in groupthink.
Right, yeah.
Our thoughts are far more interconnected than we often realize.
Wow. Okay, so how does all this actually work in practice? I mean, if thought is this complex system, how do all these pieces fit together?
Bohm uses this analogy of a flowing river.
Okay.
So imagine the river is like the entirety of thought with all its complexity
Okay.
and interconnectedness, and then the ripples on the surface of the river.
Okay.
Those are our individual thoughts,
Oh, yeah.
Constantly changing and interacting.
So our individual thoughts are like those ripples, but they're all part of this larger
Yeah.
flowing system.
Exactly. And here's where Bohm says our typical way of thinking about cause and effect kind of breaks down.
Okay.
We
Wow.
tend to focus on individual thoughts and actions.
Like trying to understand one ripple?
Yeah, like trying to understand a single ripple in isolation.
Right.
But we miss the bigger picture.
Okay.
We miss the underlying currents that are shaking everything.
And he calls that the systemic fault.
Or he calls it a systemic fault.
Yeah.
Because we're not seeing how all these elements are constantly influencing each other.
Yeah, and so that fault then leads to this other idea of incoherence.
Exactly.
That's
Which is this kind of contradiction,
Right.
confusion, and
Right.
conflict that arises when our thoughts don't really line up with reality.
So our thoughts get tangled up, and then we try to solve those problems.
With the same messed up thinking.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we untangle that mess?
Yeah.
I mean, how do we bring more coherence to our thinking?
Well, that's what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Okay, so we're back, and we're in the thick of this idea of thought as a system. We're talking about how our brains can get stuck in these thought patterns, but I'm really curious about this idea of proprioception of thought.
Yeah.
What is that?
So think about it this way. You know how you can close your eyes and still sense where your arm is in space?
Yeah.
That's proprioception.
Okay.
Your body's innate awareness of its position and movement.
Yeah.
Bohm suggests we can develop a similar kind of awareness of our thoughts.
So it's like an inner radar system
Exactly.
for my thoughts.
Wow. Yeah, it's about noticing those automatic reactions, the judgments, the assumptions that just pop up without us even realizing it.
And so if we can become aware of these thought patterns, then maybe we can start to choose how we respond to them instead of just,
Instead of just reacting on autopilot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how do we do that? It seems like
It's a tall order.
yeah.
Well, Bohm suggests a few different practices, one of them being this mindful attention to our thought processes.
Okay.
It's about observing your thoughts without judgment, almost like you're watching clouds drift by.
Oh, so kind of like meditation.
Yeah, it has a similar flavor.
Okay.
The goal is to create some space between you and your thoughts so you're not automatically swept away by them.
So instead of getting all tangled up in my thoughts, I can just sort of notice them.
Notice them as they arise.
Yeah. Okay. What about like those really sticky thoughts, though?
Yeah.
The ones that just won't let go.
Bohm would say those are the ones that need our attention the most.
Okay.
He argues that a lot of our suffering comes from clinging to those thoughts, believing they're true.
Okay. Yeah. No, when I get caught in those like negative thought loops, it's really...
It's like a mental prison
Yeah.
of our own making.
Exactly.
But the thing to remember is that thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts.
Right.
And we have the power to question them, to challenge their validity.
Okay. So instead of just accepting my thoughts as reality,
Yeah.
I can ask, like, is this thought helpful? Is it serving me?
Right, exactly.
Okay, I like that.
It's about reclaiming our power as thinkers, realizing we don't have to be at the mercy of our thoughts.
Right.
We can choose which ones to engage with and which ones to just let go of. Okay, that's really empowering. I like that. But Bohm doesn't stop there, does he? He kind of goes into these mind-bending ideas about
Yeah, he goes all the way.
the self
Yeah.
and the nature of self.
He challenges this notion of a solid, separate self.
Okay.
This idea of a me that's
Yeah.
kind of this fixed entity.
Right.
He suggests that I, that we so often cling to, is actually a construct of thought.
Oh, so you're saying the me that I think of as like my core identity is...
It's not as solid and fixed
It's not real.
as we often believe it is.
Okay.
Think about it. We get so offended when someone treats us like an object.
Right.
Like we're just a thing.
Yeah.
But then we cling to this idea of a separate I that's somehow in control.
Right. So there's
It's a contradiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if there is no solid me, then what is there?
What's really going on?
Yeah.
So Bohm draws this really fascinating analogy to physics.
Okay.
Remember how we were talking about matter as being like a ripple on a vast sea of energy?
Yeah. He suggests our thoughts and sense of self are similar,
Okay.
like ripples on this deeper stream of consciousness.
So instead of a separate I, it's more like we're all part of this
Interconnected flow
Yeah.
of consciousness.
Okay.
And just as a ripple can't exist without the water, our thoughts and our sense of self arise from this deeper interconnected reality.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to take in.
It is.
It really challenges our assumptions about individuality and,
And free will.
Yeah. But if there is no I in control, then who's responsible for our actions?
That's a great question, and one that Bohm grapples with in the book.
Okay.
He acknowledges the role of conditioned reflexes, those automatic patterns of thought and behavior that we develop over time.
Okay, so those reflexes are still a part of it.
They're still part of the equation.
Okay.
But he also suggests the possibility of something beyond the reflex, something he calls unconditioned thought.
Unconditioned thought. What is that?
It's a really tricky concept to define, and Bohm himself admits that even trying to pin it down can limit our understanding.
Okay.
But he emphasizes the importance of remaining open to the unknown, to the possibility of something beyond our current comprehension.
So just acknowledging that there might be more to the story
Exactly.
than just our conditioned responses.
Yeah. And that openness to the unconditioned is essential for breaking free from the limitations of our habitual thought patterns.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're not just our past conditioning, we're also capable of growth and transformation and insight.
Okay. That's a hopeful thought.
It is.
But if so much of our thinking is happening below the surface, unconsciously, how do we actually become aware of those deeper patterns?
Right.
How do we bring the implicit explicit, as they say?
So Bohm highlights the crucial role of language in this process.
Okay.
Words have this power to bring our thoughts into the open, to make them visible and examinable.
Oh, so by paying attention to the words we use and the stories we tell ourselves, we can kind of uncover these.
Uncover those hidden assumptions
Yeah.
that are shaping our reality.
It's like we're archaeologists of our own minds.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Okay.
And this kind of self-awareness is essential for understanding how our thoughts are shaping our perceptions and actions.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to get a lot more curious about our own thought processes
We do.
and not just accept them at face value.
Yeah.
But Bohm also talks about the limitations of knowledge, doesn't he?
He does.
How does that fit into all this?
Yeah, it might seem kind of like a downer at first,
Right.
but I think it's actually quite liberating.
Okay.
Bohm reminds us that knowledge is inherently limited
Okay.
and that our understanding of the world is always evolving.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely had those moments where I thought I had something figured out.
And then you realize
It turns out,
you were totally wrong.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a common human experience.
Okay, so how do we guard against that? I mean,
So Bohm emphasizes the importance of remaining open to new information, to different perspectives.
Yeah.
He suggests engaging in dialogue with others as a way to challenge our assumptions and expand our understanding.
dialogue as a path to collective insight.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and Bohm sees dialogue as this really powerful tool for creating shared meaning and understanding.
And that's another big theme in the book, isn't it?
It is.
So he argues that shared meaning is what binds society together, but then conflicting meanings can lead to division and conflict.
Exactly. He points out that our individual thoughts are constantly interacting with the thoughts of others, creating this kind of collective consciousness.
Right.
And when those thoughts are aligned,
Yeah.
we experience harmony and cooperation.
But when they clash.
We see conflict, polarization, breakdown in communication.
Yeah, it makes me think about like the current political climate, where it just seems like everybody's talking past each other.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a perfect example of the incoherence that Bohm is talking about.
Right.
When our shared meanings become fragmented,
Yeah.
our ability to connect and cooperate breaks down.
So cultivating shared meaning then is really crucial for creating a more,
It's essential.
harmonious and functional society.
Absolutely. And dialogue is one of the most powerful tools we have for bridging those divides and finding common ground.
Okay, so it's about being willing to really listen, to understand other perspectives, to find those common threads that connect us.
Exactly.
Okay, it sounds like a lot of work.
It is.
It also sounds really hopeful.
It is hopeful.
If we can learn to understand the power of thought and use it consciously,
Yeah.
we can really create a more positive and interconnected world.
That's the heart of Bohm's message.
Yeah.
It's a call to awareness, to responsibility, and to the possibility of collective transformation.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into thought as a system. And, we've talked a lot about how powerful our thoughts are in shaping our reality.
Yeah.
And all the different ways that thought can kind of go off the rails.
Yeah.
But I guess the big question I still have is, how do we actually change our thoughts?
Right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one thing to understand how thought works.
Right.
But it's quite another to actually shift those deep-seated patterns
Right.
that are driving our behavior.
So is there like a magic formula? Is there a...
Bohm doesn't offer a quick fix, but he does give us some really powerful insights and practices that can help.
So it's more like a journey then?
It's more like a journey of self-discovery.
Okay.
And remember how we talked about insight as this kind of active energy that can restructure our thought processes?
Right.
That's where the real transformation begins.
Okay, but insight doesn't just magically appear, does it?
It doesn't. It requires effort and attention and a willingness to challenge those habitual ways of seeing the world.
So why bother then? Why put in all that effort?
Well, imagine being able to see through the illusions that our thoughts create, to recognize those patterns that are driving our behavior,
Right.
and to make choices that are truly aligned with our deepest values.
Okay, so that's the payoff.
That's the kind of freedom and clarity that Bohm is pointing towards.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
But how do we cultivate that kind of insight? Where do we even begin?
So one of the most important practices that Bohm emphasizes is dialogue,
Okay.
both with ourselves and with others.
Okay.
He suggests paying close attention to our thought processes, noticing those assumptions, beliefs, judgments that are coloring our perceptions.
So it's about becoming like a curious observer of our own mind.
Exactly. Instead of getting caught up in the content of our thoughts,
Right.
we're just stepping back and noticing them as they arise.
Right. Okay.
And this kind of awareness allows us to create a space
Okay.
between thought and action.
Okay.
A space where we can choose how we want to respond,
Right.
rather than just reacting automatically.
So for example, if I'm like, stressed out about a deadline at work, instead of spiraling into a panic, I would just pause, take a breath, and
Notice those thoughts.
yeah.
Just notice that anxiety without judgment.
And in that space of observation, then I might start to see,
You might notice the patterns
the
that are
patterns.
creating that stress.
Right. Maybe it's a belief that I'm not good enough or fear of failure or something like that.
Exactly. And by simply acknowledging those thoughts, you begin to loosen their grip on you.
It's like taking away their power.
Yeah, you're shining a light on them.
Yeah.
And once you become aware of those patterns, you can start to challenge them,
Good.
question their validity.
Okay.
Ask yourself, are those beliefs really true?
Right.
Are they serving me well?
Okay.
Do they align with my values?
I love that. So it's about becoming like an active participant in our own thought processes rather
Yeah.
than just passive victims.
Instead of being ruled by our conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
But Bohm doesn't stop at self-reflection, does he?
Yeah.
I mean, he also talks about this idea of dialogue with others
Yeah.
as being really important.
He does, and he's not talking about just any kind of conversation.
Right.
He's talking about true dialogue,
Okay.
where participants are willing to listen deeply,
Right.
to question their own beliefs,
Okay.
and to be open to new ideas.
Okay.
And this kind of dialogue can create a space for collective insight and understanding.
So it's about recognizing that we're all part of this larger system.
We're all interconnected.
Yeah.
And by engaging in this open and honest dialogue, we can start to break down those barriers that separate us and create a more shared understanding of the world.
It's about moving from that mindset of me versus you to...
You, we.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really mind-expanding deep dive, I have to say.
It is a fascinating book.
Bohn's ideas are definitely challenging, but they're also really hopeful.
Yeah.
You know, he's inviting us to question everything we think we know about ourselves and the world, and to embrace this new way of thinking that's more holistic, more compassionate, and more aligned with the interconnectedness of real things.
He's reminding us that we have the power to change our thoughts, and in doing so, to change our world.
So if our thoughts create our world, like Bohm suggests, then the work of transforming those thoughts is really world-changing.
It is.
So I guess the question for all of us is, what kind of world are your thoughts creating right now?
That's something to ponder.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into thought as a system.